those three parties agreed on that portion, like work forward in that manner to lend credibility to this information. Because you're right, if we just came out, Lancaster just came out with a study with no input from anybody else, I'd be skeptical too. So I think this, this is an objective look at this system, and definitely glad to be a part of it.
I think we'll go for one more question with Carol, and then get Joe up here to present your views. That's okay with you, Joe?
Okay. I actually have two questions, if I could, Elizabeth. First, I'm Carol Fox with BNRC, just learning. I'm a model skeptic, and understand there's this bigger picture about all the groundwater versus parrot, and that this council has more specific answers, questions to answer about the parrot. But on the bigger picture, we talk about pieces of the puzzle, and we need to get the pieces of the puzzle. My concern is models. I'm a skeptic of them.
Yes.
And I think there are some pieces, but I'm not sure if all the pieces of the puzzle are going to be there with this conceptual model. You've talked about some conclusions. Does it definitively say that the water from the middle aquifer is being collected by the Metro Storm Lake? And if the model does not definitively say that, will there be an effort to get the other pieces of the puzzle to answer that question?
To answer that question, and the CSM does conclude that at least the majority of the water from the parrot tailings is being captured by the MST subdam. The creek is kind of the reverse view of that. If this water is traveling, I'm spacing the numbers, 1 to 3 years, travel from parrot tailings to GS9, the creek should be a fairly good indicator of how well that subdrain is working. Some of the data I provided show the effectiveness of that subdrain. So we're looking at these things not only from the aquifer side, but also turning around and looking at it from 180 degrees and saying, all right, we think it's all captured. Let's look at it a different way now and see if we come to the same conclusion. So to answer your question, the CSM does say that at least the majority of the parrot tailings water is being collected, if not all.
Just sort of should and we think, and what I'm looking for in the future is we know. And if we don't know, maybe we could get them more data to know better. And the second question I have of Nick is with these flow rates, with the parrot tailings, that removal that this council is really also focusing on, is there a chance for that aquifer to recover based on this information that's pretty much validated about these flow rates?
Based on this data, it's an incomplete picture right now, but we are working on the question as to whether or not the aquifer will clean itself. We now know that there's a lot more water flowing through the parrot area than we thought, and so it will clean itself out quicker. But we're also going to be presenting in our fingerprint analysis trends that show what happened when you remove a source to an area in this aquifer. What happens to the water quality in the shallow, in that shallow aquifer when you remove a source. And there's questions that need to be answered, and they will in time. But right now, I can't, until we publish this next report, I really can't answer the question as whether you remove a source will the aquifer clean itself up. I want to present you guys that data in a report, and that is coming, and it'll address that question.
Joe, would you like to come up and?
Sorry, Coach.
It was a good game.
Did you win?
Almost. Lost at the last 30 seconds. I'm Joe Griffin. I am the state project officer for Priority Soils. I've been working on this since really a couple of years before the record of decision. Prior to that, I'm a hydrogeologist by training. I'd like to, first of all, say that there has been an amazing amount of good work done. And you know, one of the indications was that graph that Mike put up. And if you'd asked me, are we going to, in the near future, control contaminated groundwater from entering Silverbow Creek to the extent that the creek will meet water quality standards during non-runoff conditions, I'd say, yeah, it's pretty likely. The question really goes more to what does the future hold? Because when we reach this consent decree, the decisions made in that consent decree, that is going to be good for all time. So I would say the state looks at this in a very conservative manner. Carol just asked a question about models, and I guess I'd make that a little bit clear, because I too share a real distrust of models. They can look very fancy, they can be very impressive, but it's just like anything, junk in, junk out. So this is not a model like you would typically think of a model. This is more a way to grab a lot of diverse data and hang it in one place and look at how it kind of fits together. Really, you're just kind of talking about normal kind of calculations any hydrogeologist would make. So, you know, I've already made a calculation of maybe how much water might be flowing in that mid-level zone that's contaminated. Those are the pieces and parts that you try to fit together. There is a lot of data out there. There's a lot of more data that we've collected since the record of decision. So it is going to be it's just tough, it's hard. These are natural systems, and they are difficult to explain exactly how they work. This is not engineering, this is geology and hydrogeology. I would also kind of like to make it clear that the state did not agree specifically with this portion of the record of decision, and we're in record as having said that. It's included as an appendices in the record of decision. And at that time, the Bureau had already drilled a number of wells along the MSD. And they had turned up that there was this gravelly zone, and when we sampled it, lo and behold, it was very contaminated. And so we thought more work should be done before a major decision like that should be made. That aside, I'd go back to saying that the way this works in these technical meetings, there's really good collaboration. Probably the best example is this pumping test. It was really, you know, I was there, Nick and Gary were there, Mike was there, we had some other hydrogeologists sat down. It's not just agreeing on the data, but it was agreeing on the types of analysis that would be used. We kind of went away, and Nick went off to do his work, and Mike went off to do his work, but we all had a really good idea of what we had. And it's not just a matter of a difference in those hydraulic conductivity values. It is also a complete rewriting of the concept of this aquifer. It was characterized as a very, well, I guess Gary mentioned this, that it was characterized as 200 feet thick and uniformly heterogeneous would be the best way to describe it. And one of our complaints prior to the ROD was, wow, you gotta look at the fact that this has significant flow zones, discrete flow zones that may be carrying a lot of water. As far as the real question here, you know, the way it was framed in the record of decision with this, if we remove the parrot, and I'm not suggesting that the remedy should be reopened, but remedy does have to address adequately where this water goes. But the way it was framed was with this aquifer cleanup in a reasonable time frame if we remove the parrot. Is all I could tell you as a hydrogeologist with a fair amount of experience is if we had removed the parrot tailing, it would take a while to clean up to where you could drink it. And drinking water standards are very different than aquatic life standards. I really think the real question here is the long-term threat to the creek. So we're going to make a decision here, and the remedy better be good and protective and assure us that something isn't going to happen 20 years down the road or 40 years down the road, because I don't think we're very certain what the future of BP is, for instance. But I would, you know, I've presented to you guys in the past, and I think I kind of overwhelmed you with my presentation. It was a whole lot of data. But, you know, one of the things is clear is right now, this thing is effective. The bigger question is that subdrain actually catching the contaminated water out of the middle gravel zone? It's a very difficult question to ask. We can all say there are gradients that would suggest that the water goes that way. I mean, there are vertical gradients that say that. We do not have enough information to show a horizontal gradient. So there is a fair amount of uncertainty still in what we now know. But we're working hard on putting that together. I would just say, I guess, kind of to wrap up what I was going to say, that the state is certainly interested in, I think all parties are interested in this remedy working, but we have a certain, we certainly have, we're trying to take the long view.
I have one question for you before you go. I don't want to put you on the spot, but what was your back of the envelope calculation on the volume of water in the middle aquifer, flowing in the middle aquifer?
It was about 100 gallons per minute. You know, and I was just saying, how wide is the contamination? You know, we all agreed, from the pumping test, we thought it was 15 feet thick. Mm-hmm. And then using K values, and there's a range of K values, and a hydraulic gradient of 0.004. And, you know, I don't know that 15 feet thickness describes the thickness of contaminated water, but it was a fair way to get a K value out of the hydraulic, out of the transmissivity values. Any other questions? Any questions from the audience?
Any questions from the public?
All right, there's actually a question.
Yeah,
Oh, Larry?